Hello everyone, and welcome back to my journey through One Piece. Thank you very much for joining me again. Today we're going to be going through the beginning of the Alabasta Saga, which means that we will be talking about Reverse Mountain, Whisky Peak, and Little Garden. 3 arcs in one video is a bit more than I'm used to, a bit more than you're used to, but I think I do have a bit less to say about the arcs than I do on average compared to the other arcs we've done so far, so I do think I can fit these 3 into a video. And I've started the next arc, I've started Drum Island, just a few chapters, but nonetheless, I know enough to know that it's probably best to have Drum Island have its own video. So that means putting all of the others in this one. Before I get started, just to let you know, if you want to watch the next review of the next arc, you can head over to my Patreon account where early access is available for $5 patrons. If you would like to join in the Twitch streams, where I read every single chapter live and react to it and discuss it, we go by pretty slowly, but we discuss quite a lot of things, and it's always a good time. Please do. Links are in the description and pinned comment. But before we get into the actual review of all the arcs, we will be doing the AJP's comments for this video, which relate to Arlong Park. These comments were from the Arlong Park video, so a lot of them will pertain to that arc. Thank you everyone for your submissions. Please continue to share. And like I said, even if you don't get picked, I read every single one, so they're all appreciated. The first comment is from Hurricane of Cats, who says, "This arc is my favorite because of what it does for Nami. Nami's a very closed-off character who very rarely says what she actually means, even later on in the series, and even other fans of the series get deceived by her surface materialistic nature. Getting Nami's backstory and understanding what money represents to her completely reframes everything she does before Arlong Park and afterwards. For Nami, money represents the possibility of safety, security, and even the love she has for those she cares about. Belmare's final act was to use her meager wealth to save Nami's life. For most of her life, money was the means to find salvation and to free her entire village. That sort of deep association doesn't go away. As I understand it, Nami prioritizes the finances of the crew throughout the series, not just because she likes money, but because for her that's the best way she knows to support the people she cares for most deeply. She's able to be herself with the crew because they all know that underneath the surface she is always looking out for them in her own way." I don't have a ton to add to that. I totally agree. I think that so far, how the series has played around with Nami's materialism and her fixation on money, and how it subverts that and dances around with the concept, and recontextualizes it through her backstory, and how it relates to Arlong in contrast with Arlong and relates to Belmare, and who she is as a person. I talked about all of that in great detail in the Arlong Park video. But this is a really great summation of it. I think that it's cool to have this veneer of materialism that is not completely false, it's just the complexion of it was false, and what it means is false, but its presence itself is not a mask, it was always there. So I think that's really cool. I really like that, and that was really well put. And relating to Nami, we just have one that's a clarification, sort of, from Common Pepe, who says, "Nami valuing money and stealing is not a product of her interactions with Arlong, but because of how poor she was as a child. She stole a cartography book at the beginning of her flashback. I don't think Arlong even encouraged her to steal. It was just the only way she knew how to make money." So I think this is in reference to what I said about a Twitch comment criticizing the fact that she was still stealing, she was still a thief after all that happened to her throughout the arc, and after being freed from Arlong, which is definitely notable. I guess I just didn't mention that, or didn't remember or something. Either way, important correction, this has always been a part of her. It's just that the complexion of it during her time with Arlong was exceedingly negative, but now she can turn it into a facet of her character that's mischievous and, contributory in her own specific way, and much more positive, which is really lovely. The next one is from someone whose name is withheld. "I feel like my interest in stories first and foremost stems from the world building. I love watching your analyses for many reasons, but I think your focus on characters will always add to my experience because characters are not typically my primary interest. I do wonder how you feel about the world of One Piece so far compared to your other favorite anime and manga worlds." So firstly, that's really cool. I think it's great because obviously everyone has different things they look for in stories. I love world building. I love organic organic worlds and settings coming to the fore and immersing myself in them. That's one of my favorite things about stories, and I think that's pretty clear if you've been watching my videos, that I do enjoy that a lot. The interconnectedness, the organic nature of it, the scope that gradually expands. But yeah, characters are first and foremost, my primary thing. I can totally deal with a simplistic plot, a rudimentary plot even, shallow world building even, or any number of flaws, if I really like the characters, if I find myself invested in them, if I love them, if I am just engaged with them in one way or another, regardless of if they're likable, interesting, complex, really ominous, or really great hook. Just in one way or another, if I'm engaged with the characters, everything else will come afterwards. I'm willing to be very patient, extremely patient with lots of stories if I really find myself engaged with the characters. Whereas sometimes I find it difficult to do it the other way around. Sometimes I find there's actually a series I've been watching lately where I find it difficult for myself to continue it. This is a TV show. It has exceptional direction, exceptional cinematography. The plotting is very deliberate and well thought out. It is a deeply complex story. There is tons of thought put behind it, but I just don't really care about the characters. This isn't a criticism necessarily, because I can't pinpoint why, but I just don't care. You can lay out a really complex, interesting formula or plot, and that's impressive, but I won't find it engaging if I don't have reason to attach myself to it. And for me, that reason is always the characters. If you just take a glance through my favorites, they're all character-focused stories. The vast majority, at least. So yeah, that was a big long-winded aside. But yeah, pretty much, I think it's great that my focus on characters could be different from your focus on world building or plot or anything else, art, whatever. And that through tuning into these videos, you can see things from the perspective of someone who enjoys stories in a slightly different way than you. And I, of course, love reading comments from people who experience stories in a different way than me. All sorts of different perspectives. I really enjoy that. And to answer the last question, I think I've kind of answered it before about my thoughts on One Piece's world. I think it's very impressive the way that it feels very interconnected and grand, and it keeps expanding, and you keep drawing connections, and things are slightly recontextualized here and there with the characters and their connections, and the lore and the mythos behind it. I think it's pretty damn impressive what's been established so far, and I can't see it not getting better and better and becoming one of the most fleshed out fictional worlds I've seen. It's not there yet, obviously. Still quite a bit of ways to go, but the seeds are there, and this is a long-term investment, and I can definitely see it not disappointing in that regard. I do see some connections between it and other fictional worlds. Obviously, the content of the stories is totally different, but the way that things slowly, gradually expand, and of course I'm not comparing the quality, just the sort of style and structure, reminds me a bit of A Song of Ice and Fire. I think a lot of the organic details and things that Oda throws in there just to make it feel richer and real remind me a lot of Hunter x Hunter. And I think that the focus on sort of the long distant past and previous eras with regards to Gold's Roger, for example, just that sense of history reminds me of stories like Attack on Titan, and again, A Song of Ice and Fire as well, a few of my favorite video games as well, a couple of Final Fantasy titles, Xenoblade Chronicles in a couple of ways. So yeah, those are a few of the comparisons I'd make, and all those are good ones, because everything I've named here is among my favorite fictional worlds. So it's all good. The next one's from Kevin Bagust, sorry for the pronunciation. On watching this video, I realized another meaning to Luffy putting the straw hat on Nami. It is him saying, we will temporarily swap treasures. You'll look after my treasure, and I'll look after yours. That's another meaning to, I talked about like 3 or 4 significant meanings to what Luffy did in that action. That's another one. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful symbolic gesture, a symbol of connection, and a turning point in the series in multiple ways. That scene it's amazing. And I love that even still, people are still telling me about little details that it signifies and what it represents. And the next one is actually from Julian Hartman. I don't actually have a specific response to it because the comment is quite long. Julian admitted that it's probably way too long to be featured in a video. That's probably true, but I did want to acknowledge it because it's a beautiful little comment that shares lots of things about Julian's connection with One Piece and the subject matter on display in some personal anecdotes, and I enjoyed reading it a lot, so thank you, Julian. Again, don't have a specific response to the comment because it goes all sorts of places, but I love it, and thank you for sharing it. The next is from Edgy Von Karma, who I believe was selected in an earlier video as well, so you got yourself in 2 of these. You were spot on with your analysis of Arlong, but the fisherman who really stands out to me in this arc is Hachan, Hachi. While other fishermen are rude, mean, or oppressive, espousing Arlong's beliefs of their superiority, Hachan is just a friendly, dim-witted guy who happens to be fighting for the wrong side. I think that's a big part of why people remember him more than they do Chu or Kurobi. Yeah, so I wanted to bring this up because I didn't talk too much about Hachi. I did mention him for, I think, a minute or two, kind of touched on him a little bit, but I do think he's interesting in that way through being a contrast. I think it's really cool that there is that multidimensionality of personalities on an antagonist crew like that. I think it tells you a decent amount about the character variability throughout the series that Oda wants to bring forth. Multiple perspectives, multiple personalities, balancing things out, not being too much of any one thing, and I like that. I don't find Hachi to be particularly noteworthy at the moment, aside from that concept and role, but I didn't mention this, and it's true. I totally agree with this, so wanted to bring it up here. I do agree. Simon Keys says, Arlong is to me the first truly fantastic One Piece villain, and still one of the series' best to this day. On my latest reread of this arc, I loved how bigotry is explored through the character. As in, he believes really strongly in the superiority of fishmen over humans, yet he's introduced bribing a marine and will rely on the skill of a human cartographer/navigator, Nami, to realize his ambitions. What's even better is that later arcs build on those tensions and conflicts. I don't want to spoil anything even accidentally, but I will say that in a later arc, nothing says everything. Okay, well, you didn't spoil anything. I have no idea what that means, so that's good. But it's good, that's very encouraging to know that he has a future part, because I did mention he is one of the most interesting antagonists, and my favorite outside of Mihawk so far in the series. I do really like that, all that there is to do with him. The fatalism aspect, the superiority complex, the fixation on bloodlines, and all of that. And what you say here as well, that's true. I don't know if I alluded to it in my video, but what's true is that he constantly seeks out help and is, in many different ways, exposed to ways in which humans are, maybe have the upper hand, maybe can be viewed as superior in some of these situations. I definitely mentioned that aspect of it, but the aspect of him needing Nami, it's interesting, because whether it be subconsciously or something he realizes but just doesn't want to admit outwardly, Arlong does indirectly value humanity or humans in some way. I do wonder if that'll be explored later, and I hope it is, because there's an interesting contradiction there. A simultaneous hatred and superiority complex to humans, and yet what seems to be a bit of a grudging respect. Maybe. I could be way off base, but that's what's in my mind at the moment. A bit of a parallel with him and King Bradley from Fullmetal Alchemist, Brotherhood, specifically. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can check out my video on King Bradley. It's very old, but I think it's aged well enough. But yeah, Arlong's really interesting. Can't wait to see more from him. And the last one, from Simon Uzumaki. Arlong Park is considered to be the make-or-break turning point arc for early One Piece, basically because, like you guessed, it does everything good about One Piece in one arc. Future arcs will do it better, but this is a taste of basically all, or at least most, of the themes in the series. An example of great backstory implementation, drama, teamwork, and bonds, and the emotionally charged fights and climaxes. It's an encapsulation of Oda's storytelling in the purest form, so even if it isn't one of the best arcs, it's so honest about One Piece's identity that if you don't vibe with it, it's probably safe to say that the series isn't for you. That was beautifully put. I love that. It's the purest form of One Piece's storytelling, and it's like a taster or an example of all the things that it does right in one arc. You know, it may be done better later on. Certain elements may be dwelt on more extensively later on, but this has most of the One Piece elements that make it so interesting and that are such a hook for it, and the reason that people keep coming back. So what I gather from that is that it's just a great example of the draw of it, the draw of the story. And I definitely get that. I definitely, from my little sample size, agree. And that was really well put. But yeah, those are all the AJP's comments for this video. Thank you again, and I hope you guys continue to use the hashtag to share these things with me, because I find it really interesting and beneficial. So just include that hashtag in your comments if you want them to be potentially featured in a future video. But yeah, into the actual review. Like I said, I don't have as much to say about each of these arcs individually, at least I don't think so, but I do still have plenty to say, and there were lots of interesting tidbits and moments and character bits throughout, and a couple of moments that really kind of got to me a little bit. I would say that these 3 arcs together, Reverse Mountain, Whisky Peak, and Little Garden, probably represent to me the weakest stretch of One Piece so far. I'm not saying it's bad by any means. I found lots of interesting things to grab onto, and I will defend, actually, well, somewhat defend, some controversial story moments later on, as you'll see. I definitely still enjoyed it, but to me, this was the thinnest section of One Piece so far, and I think it being 3 arcs, the start of Alabasta, it's a fair sample size, I guess you could say. Not to say that I'm not still invested, not to say that I'm not still enjoying myself, but if I were to compare it to anything I've seen so far, this is probably the thinnest and the least amount of engagement I had with the story. I'm not going to dwell on criticisms or anything. I don't really have tons of specific ones at all. It's just a matter of how engaged I was comparatively. Once again, like always, I'm not interested in being a critic and laying out and trying to substantiate my opinion about this being the weakest stretch so far. I'm not interested in that. I'm just here to talk about what I found most interesting and what I found most engaging and the ideas I took away from it, and try to really sort of verbalize my growing investment with the series because, you know, despite me being less engaged with this stretch compared to other ones, I'm still deeply engaged with the series, deeply invested. I can't see myself stopping anytime soon. And I think a lot of what these arcs do is set up a lot of future things. They plant lots of seeds. We'll be dwelling on that, of course, as we get into it specifically, but I think a lot of this was a lot of laying of foundation, similar to the first chapters of the series in general. A lot of the things reminiscent of like Orange Town or Romance Dawn. It feels like this is a bit of a fresh blank slate with a new situation, and a lot of thematic and character and world plot building details are being established here, so it definitely has that function as well. So the first of these is actually my favorite of the 3, and the shortest, I guess, Reverse Mountain. I like this arc quite a bit. I found it very enjoyable, and I found the climax to be very emotional. I asked my chat about the general reception of this arc and what people thought of it, and what people generally tended to say was most people quite like it, most people think it's decent, solid, pretty good, but generally forgettable in the grand scheme of the series. And that's interesting. I can definitely see why people like it, and I can definitely see why it kind of fades in the memory of people if the later arcs are going to be as gigantic as they promise to be. And even in comparison to things like Baratier and Arlong, and even Logtown and Syrup Village, to me, it's definitely a bit of a side detour. But you guys know how I feel about detours. I really liked it. I really liked it a lot. I think a lot of the draw of it was a lot of things that I liked about Logtown. There were a couple of primary themes here that I really grasped onto. The first, I think, the slightly lesser one, is the idea of that dream. That far-off dream that some would say is impossible, but that you know is definitely within reach if you just hold strong. Stay resolute, as illustrated through Laboon, as we'll get into, and sort of the nuances of what happens if that dream is futile, the attitude towards that dream, the complexion of it being potentially unreachable. Is it still fulfilling if it is unreachable? Is it still fulfilling if it'll result in failure? And what is there to fall back on? Is the journey towards it worth it? All those sorts of things were tied to this arc. And in that way, it actually reminds me of the Gaimon chapter, chapter 22, which still remains to this day one of my favorite chapters for what it represents in concentrated form. In addition to that, this chapter more than anything, which I loved, interlinked that dream idea with Luffy, sort of the infectious energy and nature of the boy, of how he is just so emblematic of the pirate spirit, of the spirit of adventure, of searching out and going for your dreams, and how he's almost a force of nature that other people can't help but be dragged into. Luffy's fervor for this spirit, for this soul, for these dreams, this freedom in these dreams, is so infectious that he is this storm that just pushes himself, this force of nature that just pushes himself, wills himself towards his goal that others just can't help but getting swept up in. You can see that through a lot of his crewmates, and you can see that through Laboon here. And so those are the themes I take away from this primarily. Now, there are a lot of logistical things that I found really interesting about the start of this arc, or this arc in general. Firstly, there is this huge, gigantic crescendo of Logtown. Very grand, very epic. We have the storm, we have this narration of Gold Rogers, we have all these new character elements introduced, the world expands a ton, and it's just very dramatic as all the members of the Straw Hats once again restate their goals and their dreams and what they're doing this for as they head towards the Grand Line. It's a huge high, and then here, it's a come down from it. It's a respite, and then a very slow, gradual, ramping up into future arcs, Drum Island and whatever comes after it. And I like that. I like that because how do you possibly continue on the story after that high? How do you build on that without it becoming habituated, without becoming kind of numb to that excitement? We have the huge, pulsating Baratier arc, the deeply dramatic and emotional Arlong Park arc, and then Logtown, which is so characteristic of all there is to love about One Piece in general, and does all these things about the world and expands it, and it's so dramatic and epic, and just thrills you to the core. How do you build from that? No, you take a step back. Oda knew from the start that he was in this for the long haul, and I'm not saying there is no way to continue on a high from an arc like Logtown for a series, but that would much more be the shorter-term approach in general. Obviously, there are no rules to that, I'm just saying in general. It's a sort of head of steam approach, as it just ramps up and up and up and up and up. Maybe for a story that was going to only be 200, 250 chapters, something like that. But Oda knew that he was in this for the long haul, ideally, and so the correct move here, I think, in terms of tone and structure and pacing, is to give you a taste of what you're going to see in terms of the epic drama and scale and some hints at darkness and all this interconnectedness, and then give us this glimpse of it through Logtown, and then take a step back. Give us a taste. And then you're just really fiending for more of that, but at the same time, you're still engaging in these detours. That's how I look at it. I'm a big fan of the general approach. I'm a big fan of what Oda does here, and I think it serves the story in the long term extremely well. And I think it's very mature, because the temptation would no doubt be to just ramp up and just build on that and lean into that drama. But I think for One Piece specifically, the proper move was to take a step back, and that's what we do with these arcs, with Reversed Mountain in particular. It keeps things fresh, it breaks up things, it keeps things variable, and I like that. I'm definitely a patient person when it comes to storytelling. As long as there's substance and quality there, I'm okay with engaging in detours and side quests. My inner JRPG/RPG player just came out there, and just taking things slowly. I'm okay with that, as long as it's still substantial, as long as it builds to something. And One Piece builds to something. One Piece is substantial. But we're introduced to some world-building details, or geographic details, as Nami sort of comes into her own as the navigator. The crew are kind of becalmed, and having watched Black Sails, and I'm not a huge pirate fanatic, but you know, Black Sails is one of my favorite shows. If you've seen it, you know what I mean. I know the horror of being becalmed. That is a horrible situation, and obviously there's more of a light tone towards this, but it's not good. Calms are terrifying, and what we learn from Nami here is that the Grand Line is situated sandwiched in between two calm belts, which is treacherous. Being stuck in a calm at sea where you are just drifting very slowly. You may not get anywhere for days. Your food stores could run out. Your water stores could run out. It could be damaging for morale and mentality of the crew. And, you know, our crew are not short of ambition and morale. So that wasn't a big problem here, especially because they were able to evade that quickly. But I wonder if that was a hint at something to come. I'm not sure. But either way, even if it's not, it's an interesting world-building detail that I appreciate. I like these little things, and I like to learn more and more details about the world, which is provided here. And it also illustrates Nami's smarts, and her contributions to the crew. Without her, they would be up shit's creek. They would have no chance. We're also introduced to the concept of sea kings, these creatures, these gigantic creatures that sort of rule these waters that will prove to be obstacles. They prove to be obstacles already, and I imagine that'll continue as we go along, which is another interesting little bit of a hook, little bit of a detail, and just the concept of these gigantic sea creatures is just cool. It awakens that little kid in you who thought of these fantastical creatures in these adventure stories, and I like that. I'd be lying if I said that doesn't have a sort of very childish draw for it to me, in the best possible way. So these Sea Kings terrorize the crew a little bit. In the midst of all this, which I thought was really funny, Luffy's hat falls off and then Zoro catches it. Nice little detail about the importance of the hat and their connection, and everyone knows you don't touch the hat. The hat needs to remain safe. But essentially, I'm gonna be really simplifying this and not using the proper terminology, but it's really interesting details that Nami again communicates, that because of the way the currents are flowing, and the dynamics of the currents and where they coalesce from the different seas, Reverse Mountain is essentially the heart of it. There's the two calm belts, and the Grand Line's in the middle, but to enter the Grand Line, you have to get past Reverse Mountain, which is the convergence of a bunch of different sea currents. And I find the physics explanation of that, whatever you would call it, to be, again, a nice additive detail of world building that I appreciated. And I'm not doing it justice by explaining it like this. It's very simplified and potentially wrong, but it wasn't lost on me. I really enjoyed the detail, and what essentially has to happen is they have to climb up the mountain and get past it. And Reverse Mountain is a kind of like the apex, from what I can tell, of almost a belt of mountainous islands or something like that, or mountains or land. It's land, which is called the Red Line. Those are the dynamics I'm getting. Could be foggy on the details. If I've said anything wrong, please correct me in the comments, but that's my understanding of it, and I don't think that's too far off. Again, nice expansion of the world, and I can't imagine these things will be introduced if they don't play an important part later. But it's really glorious because they make it up the mountain, and then they come out the other side, and they're just... the wide expanse is ahead of them. Luffy is beaming, they're all beaming, it's all joyous, and they're like, wow, this is it, this is why we're here, let's go. That sense of a grand adventure, the expanse ahead of them is just infectious. They can't help but beam at it. And then a gigantic whale immediately rises up and poses an obstacle to them, which is terrifying, obviously. And immediately the first thing I noticed was the very clear scratches on the whale's nose, whatever, the front of their face. It's clear that the whale has been scratched in some way. I didn't know initially if it was abuse, if it was some sort of self-harm, which is essentially the long and short of what it ended up being, but it was a nice visual hook for this little arc that immediately caught my attention. What's funny is the whale wreaks some havoc. It destroys the front. Again, my ship terminology is not very good, but the front of the bow. I think the front of the ship is called the bow. I could be wrong. Either way, there's a little creature head thing that Luffy likes to sit on at the front of the boat that breaks off in the commotion. So Luffy is disproportionately mad about that, which I found very funny. That's my seat, you broke my seat. And something more serious happens immediately after that. The whale swallows up all of Luffy's friends. Luffy is left outside of it, and Usopp, Nami, Zoro, and Sanji all get swallowed up. And there's an almost humorous quiet after it, where Luffy just stares at it and goes, hold on, I need them for my adventure. Give me back my friends. And then we get to a really humorous moment, at least in my stream, where Luffy climbs on top of the whale and is like stomping on him and going, let my friends out, blah, blah, blah. And then he looks and there's a hatch. There's a hatch on top of the whale. To which I just went, is that a hatch? And it was just so left field to me. I wasn't expecting that at all. And I kind of sat in silence for a few seconds. And then it continues and we see a literal like collection of small islands within the whale, and someone living there. It was hilarious. It was bizarre. I loved it. The crew is just don't know what to make about the situation at all. There's a house. There's a man. The man saves them from a giant squid that was attacking them. And Luffy sees that there's all types of facilities inside this whale. Luffy continues to explore the interior this oddly industrial-looking mechanical facility throughout the whale, and the crew talk to this guy whose name is Crocus. And then it's established here that the reason that the whale, whose name is Laboon, the reason that Laboon has these scratches and marks at the front of its face is that it's ramming its head into the mountain, the red line, trying to break out of it, or trying to break it down. And I don't remember who says this or how this is said, but what really struck me immediately is that it had a mournful cry. Its cry, it was screaming out, crying out for something, and it felt very mournful. It was suffering. It is suffering for some reason, one reason or another. And then, as the crew are slowly learning about Crocus and Laboon, we get introduced to a couple of new antagonistic figures, Miss Wednesday and Mr. Nine. They're trying to blast a hole in the whale, they're whaling, to try and feed their village, to get some food for their village. They've gone on this mission to retrieve this whale meat. This would feed them for a long time. That's what they're doing here. They're trying to kill Laboon, and Crocus is trying to protect him. Now, Laboon is hurting himself, ramming against the wall to break it down. Crocus consistently tells him, no, do not do this. You can't do this. It's futile. There's no point. This is what separates the seas, this red line, and it can't just be broken down by a whale ramming its head against it. There's no chance. I just remembered, actually, the person who said that the whale had mournful cries, it was Nami. So I really like how much she contributes with her observations and knowledge throughout this arc. But yeah, Crocus, it's established then, he has all these tranquilizers that he uses to stop Laboon from doing this. He's protecting him in his own way. And the backstory is then revealed for Laboon. The story here is that Laboon traveled the world, traveled the seas with pirates. They stopped here because their adventures lay beyond it, and Laboon, for obvious reasons, could not travel past it. His size. Now, these pirates who traveled with him, his friends essentially, promised him that they would be back. They would be back, they would do their explorations, and then they would be back to reunite with him once again. And so this was Laboon's final stop. It's where he had to stop. And so they left him in the care of Crocus. But the thing is, despite their promise, it has been 50 years since Laboon has last seen these pirates, last seen his friends. And so what he's been doing is ramming his head against the red line to try to reach them, in the vain hopes that they will be together again. And there's just this feeling of it being futile, you know? There's this feeling of it being such an improbability. The hope is so faint for these people to be alive. It's been 50 years, that's a hell of a long time, obviously. They've been sailing the seas, who knows what happened to them. Also, just there is no way to crash, to break the red line the way that Laboon is doing it. And so there are levels of barriers here. Barriers between Laboon and what his desire is. And it's very sad. And it contextualizes Laboon's mournful cry that echoes throughout the sea, and really adds this weight to it. It's very tragic. He just wants to get to his family. But it's been so long, it's been 50 years, they're separated. Who knows what they've faced, confronted? Who knows if they're alive? Who knows if they just stopped and made a life for themselves beyond the red line? And so to me, this is very directly representative of a different complexion of the crew. Laboon himself is a kindred spirit with the crew, but with a very different complexion put on his dream. It's this distant, improbable dream that isn't something that's new to One Piece. We have Nami with her dream of charting the whole ocean. We have Luffy wanting to become king of the pirates. Sanji finding the All Blue, which is said to be this mythical place that doesn't exist. Zoro becoming the strongest, greatest swordsman alive. And then Usopp's more abstract, of course. But nonetheless, the idea of this improbable dream and striving for it, no matter what others say, no matter how impossible or improbable it may seem, is a consistent theme throughout One Piece. And it's the same thing with Laboon. They have all their dreams, Laboon has his, to find his family once again. After so long, with so much metaphorical and literal distance and obstacles between them. But the difference is that Laboon is suffering. The crew is jubilant. They're excited. They believe, and they have hope and optimism and idealism and romanticism. Laboon is desperate, and perhaps even has accepted deep within that this is just not going to happen. I just can't reunite with them. and it's something of a grieving process, maybe some sort of denial. And so Laboon yearns for this far-off dream, that there's just enough hope for him to not give up, but really does feel futile. And I say futile, but the futility is not because of the far-off chance of it, because that is nothing that's new to any of our crew. It's because of Laboon's attitude towards it. Laboon really just feels desperation and grief and sorrow and suffering and pain towards this. Someone in chat mentioned that Laboon is directly inspired by the idea of the loneliest whale. That story of the whale that's out there somewhere in the sea whose frequencies of his cry are just off. No other whale in the sea, no other creature in the sea has tuned their frequencies, for lack of a better term, to the cries of this whale, and so it cries out and no one hears it. The loneliest whale in the world, such a sad idea. You can see how this directly inspired Laboon. And so, in my opinion, Laboon represents that far-off dream, but sort of the example of someone who would go after that far-off dream, or something, a creature in this case, feeling that failure would be the end of the world. Whereas the other ones, they are so in tune with the journey and the detours and the adventure towards that they get value in the little detours on the way to that, so much so that you feel that even if they didn't achieve their goal, it would be okay. They could strive for this endless ideal and not achieve it, and be okay. But that isn't the case with Laboon, and it's a beautiful thematic foil there. The cover stories continue. We see that Garp is not dead. I was premature in saying R.I.P. Garp. Garp is alive and well, Garp was just sleeping, and Garp takes Kobe and Helmeppo under his wing to train them. So, not R.I.P. yet, Garp. I saw a lot of you guys in the comments laughing at my R.I.P. Garp little thing. That was really funny, and I enjoyed that a lot, but just a reminder. When I'm speculating about something, and I just may be very wrong, please don't make it clear whether I'm right or wrong, or allude to something. The vast majority of the comments in response to the R.I.P. Garp stuff were hilarious, because everyone would just go, R.I.P. Garp, we hardly knew ya. Oh man, I'll miss you, Garp, and stuff like that. And me obviously having read it, and knowing that I was wrong, and knowing that my little jokey prediction or whatever I said was wrong, it was hilarious. But there were also people who just said, oh, Garp isn't dead. Garp isn't dead, you just, the cover stories is just a bit, deceiving in that way, or Garp isn't dead. Like, they would just straight up tell me that the truth of what was going to happen later in the story. Please do not do that. I don't want to be spoiled on anything that includes predictions about things like this. You can be vague, you can put a spoiler tag, you can say spoilers, and then a few lines down, say something, that's great, I won't read it then. But don't just say, oh no, Garp is alive. Because those comments will get deleted. My mods will delete them. The only reason they didn't get deleted in the Arlong Park video was because I had already read these arcs, so I knew that he wasn't dead, so they didn't have to be deleted. But for general stuff like that, please don't say one way or another about what to expect. Just to make sure that my experience remains fresh, that I don't know what to expect. I would appreciate that. But yeah, good for Garp, and I wish him all the best in training Kobe and Helmeppo. It's revealed that Crocus is a doctor, and the reason he's able to protect him and tranquilize him and treat him being Laboon, is because of a lot of his expertise, and building these facilities, this was all for him. And it's very touching, it's very kind. Crocus is a very kind person, a bit rough around the edges, but I enjoyed him a lot. And what's notable is that Luffy immediately wants him on his crew. And it's again another instance of Luffy, it's clear that Crocus knows what he's doing, but Luffy immediately, by the way, I didn't mention it, but Luffy got reunited with them later on. Luffy immediately wants Crocus to be on his crew as a doctor. It's a vacant position, so it makes sense. But what's interesting is that the stimulus for Luffy to ask him to be on the crew was not his experience or expertise, it was in response to understanding what he had done for Laboon. It was in response to his kindness and character, and Luffy respected that, and so wanted him on the crew. Never mind his age, never mind his spot in life, he's in his 70s, never mind if he's even suited to the job. Luffy just sees his character, he respects it, and true to the type of person Luffy is, asks him to be on the crew. And it's just a continuation of that consistency of his character. Once you pass that threshold of likability or respectability for Luffy, he will protect you, and in rare cases like this, he'll ask you to be on his crew. There's some shenanigans with Miss Wednesday and Mr. Nine. Don't have much to say about them, but then they eventually leave, and then the story goes back to the focus of Laboon. And then the fate of the crew is revealed, well, something of the fate of the crew is revealed by Crocus, who says the crew fled the Grand Line and then they got stuck in a comm belt, and just for a bunch of reasons there's no way for them to come back. You add all the stuff that I talked about earlier, add to that the fact that they got stuck in a comm belt, their status is uncertain, it's just not looking good, and it's best to think of the crew as it's not possible for them to reach Laboon again. And Crocus says a very good line here, which is one of my favorites of the arc, favorites in One Piece, which is, "Weak hearts soon succumb to fear on the Grand Line." You know, it's nothing we didn't know about before, it's nothing we didn't predict, or it's not new information, but it's just very dramatic and really sets the stage and really nails home the nature of what happened to their crew, what could potentially happen to our crew, just the scale again, the seriousness of what they're taking on. It's nothing to be taken lightly. In response to that as well, we get a lovely little tidbit from Sanji, who says, "And the weak of heart cared more for their lives than the promises they'd made." And hightailed it out of there, eh? Which is interesting, because him being someone who, at the beginning, dedicated his life towards that promise to Zeph, put his life aside, or put his own ambitions aside to serve Zeph, and Zeph's dream, and being selfless in that way. He's a direct contrast to that. You know, he put this promise he made to someone else ahead of his life. These people, because alluding to that fear, I didn't mention it because I just thought about it but didn't verbalize it. The importance of that line from Crocus is that they will never be able to come back here because of all the stuff with the comm. Their status is unknown, but also weak hearts like theirs will be too stricken by fear to be able to come back here, to have the courage to come back here and to see Laboon. And so Sanji says these people weak of heart puts their own lives ahead of the promise they made to him, in direct contrast to what he did with Zeph, which is he put his promise ahead of his life. So it's just an interesting little introspective moment for him there. An interesting contrast that kind of elevates Sanji a little bit for me. And Crocus also reveals that Laboon likely knows, he's explained this to him, that the crew are not coming back, but it's said that he's terrified of losing that hope. He just mourns and cries and screams out for them, because he doesn't want to think of a world where that hope is gone. It's too painful, and it's all the complexion and attitude towards that hope, and you contrast that with the crew, who their hope is characterized much more by genuine optimism and idealism, and like I said, jubilance and enthusiasm, and a love for life and this journey and excitement that'll make everything on the road to that hope, even if it ends up not being achieved, fulfilling. But Laboon is just the opposite of that. Complete contrast. And this is a peak Luffy moment that we get here. Luffy is just sitting back, observing all of this, understanding what Laboon, what his situation is. Then he starts a little bit of a brawl, a bit of a fight with Laboon. They tussle a little bit, as much as a man and a whale can tussle. And then so Luffy, grinning, says, "It's a draw. Their fight is a draw. I'm pretty strong, aren't I?" And Laboon is looking at him in shock after their little duel. And then Luffy says, so beautiful, "Your friends may be gone for good, but you've got a rival for life in me. After we circle the Grand Line, we'll come back, and we're gonna fight again." And in response to that, Laboon starts crying. He tears up. It's so beautiful. Such an encapsulation of Luffy. The crew look on, just smiling. Crocus looks on, smiling. And Laboon cries out, but it isn't a mournful one. It's one of what I assume to be encouragement and happiness for the first time. At the very least, it's a cry that wasn't mournful for the first time in 50 years. It's a cry that isn't painful for the first time in 50 years. And it's impossible to overstate the importance of what Luffy does for him here. He gives him a whole new lease on life. He gives him fresh new hope, and he changes the complexion of his dream from one that was desperate and very negative to one that's hopeful, to one that's characteristic of the crew. It's like, in an abstract way, he allows Laboon to be part of the crew. There's a lot of symbolism here. Symbolically, he turns Laboon's suffering from the waiting into excited anticipation, and this directly reflects the crew. It's some sort of induction, a little bit. Not directly, of course, but in an abstract sort of way. And the cherry on top here, again, another beautiful thing, is that Luffy puts the symbol, the crossbone with the straw hat symbol, on the front of Laboon, covering the scars. And he says, "This is our contract, and so don't make it wear away by ramming yourself into the cliff, into the red line." So this ensures that not only is his life Laboon's life completely turned around, part of the crew here, almost directly by having the mark of the crew on him now, he won't hurt himself, and the complexion is completely changed around. And it's totally representative of the idea of Luffy just being so infectious, this force of nature that ebbs and flows and almost forces people, but not necessarily, because they always wanted this in the first place, to follow him and to look at the world in the way he does. And he does that for Laboon, and it's beautiful. And then so yeah, I love that. It was the most heartfelt moment of these three arcs for me. I adored it. We then get a bit more information about the nature, the world building details. We learn about the function of log poses. We learn about the nature of log poses, which allow you to navigate through the Grand Line by means of islands. So essentially the log pose is kind of a compass that sends you to an island, it recalibrates while you're on the island to send you to the next one, and then you just follow it along. And you can travel that way, and you can explore the Grand Line that way. And that immediately stimulated my imagination a little bit. Going across to islands in sequence, perhaps we're going to be doing an arc per island or something like that. That would make sense to me. That seems like a good structure for this, organic way to explore the world and show us more of this creativity that Oda has through this structure. And then we're introduced to the island at the end of it all, Raftel, the last island of the Grand Line. It's an island covered in fog, and no one has ever landed there except for the crew of the Pirate King, the Gold Roger. And Luffy says, "You mean no one's done it until we get there?" So that is the hook. This place, just the art for this place looks extremely ominous, extremely dark. I can't imagine that whenever we get there, some dark stuff won't take place, some highly dramatic, high-stakes stuff. And I'm just so excited. It was a great hook at the end of this arc for where things are going in the future, and a great foundation laid. And Luffy's confidence, as we would expect anything else. And then the crew are just eating before they continue on their journey. Luffy eats Nami's meal, which Sanji made for Nami. Sanji continues to simp. He gets upset at Luffy for doing this, so he kicks Luffy in the face. Nami, in the midst of putting the log pose on her wrist, saying, "Alright, so this is essential for our journey. I gotta make sure I don't lose this." It breaks because Luffy, he kicks Luffy. Luffy crashes into it. The log pose is broken. I laughed. I found that pretty funny. And then in the midst of this, we revisit for a quick second the duo, Mr. None and Miss Wednesday. We hear about the Unluckies, a vulture and a otter, interesting, who are their superiors, who are reprimanding them a little bit for not being able to capture Laboon. They're dropped into the ocean. Luffy's out on the ocean after being kicked in there by Sanji, and they ask Luffy and the crew, "Take us to our home, Whisky Peak," to which Luffy agrees. And there's some interesting little details here and there about how their work requires them to be secretive, how they can't really say much. There's some mystery shrouded around this company, whoever they work for. They get a replacement log pose, and then they set out. And then Laboon and Crocus say goodbye to them, and Crocus has a great little line at the end of the arc to kind of hook us into the next one, or the future developments. Again, Oda laying future plot elements early on, love it. He says, "These pirates have a special air about them, specifically Luffy," and he's thinking about Luffy and how he could be special, and he goes, "Eh, Roger?" So Crocus is acquainted with Roger. He sees maybe a likeness between Luffy and Roger. He's speaking to Roger in some sort of abstract way. It's a great end to the arc. And overall, I enjoyed Reverse Mountain quite a bit. It tackles all the themes I talked about before, lays a bunch of future plot foundations, great emotional climax. It elevates Luffy really well. It's a great Luffy arc. And it's short and sweet and does the job and builds the world and does a lot of great mechanical things while being a really nice, self-contained individual story. I enjoyed Reverse Mountain a lot. I would give Reverse Mountain something like a solid to strong 7 out of 10. I enjoyed it a lot. Definitely something I look back on fondly. And the Laboon story and how he was a thematic foil with Luffy and the crew, there's something special right there. The core of the arc is very resonant. But so that's the end of Reverse Mountain, and we go into the next arc, Whisky Peak. Now, I had a lot of people in chat telling me that this was their least favorite arc in the entire series, and it's something I can definitely see. This is definitely the thinnest arc, I think, in terms of substance. It's got a lot of plot elements, but not a huge amount of thematic weight, huge character weight for me to grasp onto or find really interesting or substantial, at least not that I was able to see. It's the first arc, I think, that doesn't have a defined theme throughout. aside from like little thematic notes like the nature of Baroque works, the sort of pragmatism and danger associated with the Grand Line ramping up. You know, there are little thematic notes about things like that, but nothing defining of the arc, like I could see with previous arcs. For me personally, like I said, the plot seemed to me, or the arc seemed to me, to be the most set-up arc so far, in that the plot in and of itself was mostly a vehicle for laying foundations, and for Zoro being badass and cool. So while previous arcs of Reverse Mountain and Logtown, for example, Romance Dawn, in a way, were definitely setting up a lot of things, they, in and of themselves, in my opinion, had a very self-contained identity, a self-contained story, a thematic resonance, whereas this one doesn't quite have it, in my opinion. But like I talked about, the scale definitely ramps up here. We have, in the cover stories, we have Helmeppo returning to the Navy, and then Garp taking them under his wing. I sort of got ahead of myself a little bit, but that's all going on in the background here. And then we get the proper introduction to the Whisky Peak arc. The crew are sailing along. Some of my favorite parts of the arc were these introductory scenes. It's very cute, it's very adorable. It's snowing here, and for anyone who doesn't know, snowy areas, that's my weakness. When I play JRPGs or RPGs, wintry, arctic, snowy areas are so comfy and cute and immersive and adorable. I just love them. They're kind of my weakness. So seeing this was right up my alley, and the crew just having fun and making snow people and having snowball fights or whatever, it was great. It was some great slice of life content that I really enjoyed. And I loved Usopp models his Snow Queen after Kaya, which is... I love Usopp. But in the midst of this, Nami is kind of panicking a little bit. Nami is kind of out of her depth a little. She's wondering about the unpredictable weather patterns, the currents, the way that the ship is going, the directions, the log pose is contradicting itself. Nami, this is the biggest challenge Nami has ever had as a navigator, and she has been a navigator for 8 years properly for Arlong's crew. And so that just tells you the scale of truly how unpredictable the Grand Line is. Conventional logic, preconceived rules, none of it works here. And I think this is really important for, again, grounding this thing. We, as the audience, are taken on this journey with Luffy, who is so idealistic and over the top and takes on challenges like nothing else. But for us to have a sense of the scale for these sorts of dangers and what they're actually taking on outside of the realms of Luffy's insane I can take on anything mentality, it's important to ground this, and Nami's perspective here is really good for that, through her just not having a handle on the logistics of their travel. But as I repeated before, the log pose is a great organic way for these detours. It's a great storytelling tool for them to have to go to the island, wait there for it to calibrate, spend enough time there for an arc, for example. Not sure how many there will be, but there's already been 2 like that, which is cool. I think there's going to be at least 3, so we'll see. But it's nonetheless a great vehicle for Oda's creativity and how he wants to show off this world and what all these islands contain. It's a great tool for that. It's organic, it's natural, it all makes sense, and it's very smart. But they eventually arrive to Whisky Peak to take the duo there, and they're welcomed like heroes. There's a festival to honor their arrival, and it's a total contrast to a lot of the town's pre-Grand Line, which tells a story of its own, but it's also a little fishy. It's also a little strange. Nonetheless, everyone's having fun during these parties. There are lots of nice little character bits, little visual allusions to how they're each having fun. It's again very cute. I enjoyed this chapter a lot. And they're welcomed in by someone named Igarapoi, who's also known as Igaram, who I think is what I'm going to refer to him as, but also known as Mr. 8, part of the Baroque works system. But I'm jumping ahead a little bit because he introduces himself as Igarapoi, and then it's revealed after that he is Mr. 8. So there is clearly some devious means behind this festival welcome. There's a bit of a collaboration between Miss Wednesday, Mr. 9, and Igarapoi, and all that's going on here. Someone named Miss Monday is also introduced, and they catch wind of the fact that Luffy, who they are welcoming in, has this 30 million bounty, and they get greedy for it, which is understandable. It's a little integration with the fact that this town is clearly in need of food, resources, money, anything to self-sustain. They're a devious, ill-intended town. What they're doing is very wrong, but it has basis in necessity, which I appreciate. It doesn't seem to be evil for evil's sake, or wrong for wrong's sake. They were trying to get Laboon, whale meat, to feed the island. They need money, they need resources, they need stuff. And Luffy is a conduit to that. And a neat little detail we get here is that the government wants them alive. The reward for Luffy specifically is more for him to be alive, because they want to make a show of him, to make an example of him, by executing him publicly. If he's dead, that's great, but they'd much rather prefer to curtail pirate activities by making a show of this person who's now quite infamous and discouraging other pirates by sending a message, which is interesting. I really like that little detail for characterizing the government and their thought process behind how to combat this. But yeah, this meeting between all of Baroque Works, or these specific members, happens in the dead of night when everyone's sleeping, passed out after the party. But Zoro is awake. He is wary. He knows who they are. He knows their Baroque Works. A neat little detail is that they actually tried to recruit him in the past, which I'm not sure if that'll come back to be significant in the future, but it's, again, a nice little detail to flesh out them and Zoro. And it's again reiterated that their organization is top secret, and a lot of what they do here is tricking pirates who have bounties to be welcomed in here through these festivals and parties and whatever, only to capture them for bounties to then perpetuate and self-replenish their resources. And a nice little detail as well that's sort of revealed at this period of time is that the cactus that are strewn throughout the island. Whisky Peak is a very interesting climate. It's like a sort of desert-esque island with cactuses all over the place. A lot of these cacti are graves, which is just generally raw and badass and cool, but also speaks of the threat that Baroque Works pose. So they're established here as quite a threat. To skip ahead a little bit, Zoro does beat them down. He beats their asses, but they're nonetheless shown not to be total fodder. There may be fodder with regards to Zoro, but they're still, while the crew may be up here and Zoro may be up here or whatever, they're still not bottom feeders. They're still competent. They have an operation going on. They are a threat, and the people they serve may be the real genuine threat, on the scale of someone like, who knows, Mihawk. Who knows? But then them themselves are shown, and I think established in my opinion, to be competent, even if they get beaten by Zoro. But Zoro decides, hearing of their plan to capture Luffy, and everything, and what their devious means are, he decides to fight them all. And he wants to test out his new sword, the Cursed Sword, which he calls a problem child. And he uses this as the test run. He is so goddamn raw, I swear. And then yeah, Zoro beats their asses. The paneling is, again, I think it flows quite well. It's very raw, very simplistic. Don't have too much to say about these fights, it's just Zoro being a badass and testing out his new sword. And it was engaging, it flowed, just don't have too much to say about it, really. And it's funny, I was just talking about how they're competent. Maybe I should rather say that they are competent when not compared to Zoro, or rather, they run a competent operation. You get what I mean. They're not totally headless chickens. They have some semblance of a plan, and they are not total scrubs. But Zoro says here, it's an embarrassment to be fighting these guys, which is quite a statement. The boss, it's stated here as well that the boss left the town in their care, and they are not defending it too well. But then again, they are up against Zoro, so they kind of drew the shortest straw there. But ultimately, they show their competence by eventually capturing Luffy. Luffy is fast asleep, his belly is completely expanded, and a little detail is that I like that there's a reason for this, because a classic shonen protagonist thing is for them to eat a lot, them to eat a lot and their belly to expand for exaggeratory reasons. You see that a lot of times in a lot of shonen, but Luffy has a genuine reason for his stomach to expand like that, the gum fruit. So I really like that. I think that's just clever. But yeah, Luffy is taken hostage, he's asleep. Very humorous thing is that Zoro finds it annoying that he can't at least be awake while he's taken hostage, which I found funny. But there's no sense of genuine danger here. It's all very much played for establishment, for badassery, for some humor, and it's very clear that these people, they're not the big bads. But then we get introduced to Miss Valentine and Mr. Five, who seem to be higher ranked officials part of Baroque Works, who again reiterate that the motto for Baroque Works is mystery, which they keep repeating that sentiment, and I'm interested to see what it would potentially lead to. It's certainly representative of Sir Crocodile, if I'm skipping ahead, being an ominous, mysterious person, so we'll see. But then it's said that there's likely an infiltrator in their ranks, a couple of infiltrators, to which Igaram panics and says, oh, they've sussed me out. And it's revealed here that he is the commander of the Royal Guard of Alabasta, an island further along the way. And he is currently guarding the Princess Nefeltari Vivi. They are disguised as Baroque Works operatives. And so I initially wondered what the motives here were. This is really interesting plot stuff that I was really grasping onto, which I was glad was being introduced after the whole Zoro fight and all of that. But I immediately thought, what's their motive? This is explained later on, but that's yet another hook here. What is their deal? Why did they have to infiltrate Baroque Works? For what purpose? And it's just, it stimulates the imagination. And then part of it is then revealed as they see Zoro is a competent fighter. They ask him to escort Vivi, Princess Vivi, to Alabasta. He kind of stumbles into being the best prospect for being a temporary royal guard, you know? Which is kind of funny. And Zoro's kind of taken aback by that, but then Nami pops up and says, yeah, sure we can. For a price. She's very resourceful, very pragmatic. On a journey like this, you know, some might say that she's being predatory in a way, taking advantage of that, of people who are in dire straits. But you really got to think about their situation here. They need all the resources they can get. Any money is useful. They are in unpredictable waters, and it was established earlier on in the arc that Nami is definitely a good person to look to as a leader for this expedition in terms of navigation, but she's out of her depth to an extent. So every little bit will help. Money will help. And to add to Nami's resourcefulness, we see that she was faking being drunk. She was having a drinking contest throughout the whole party, and which was a great little, cute little funny moment as she drank everyone under the table, but even still, she said she held herself back, which is hilarious. But she was suspicious from the start. She said she wouldn't get drunk in a town that welcomed pirates like this. There was clearly something that was up. So it's very smart, but it also shows her kind of cutthroat pragmatism there. I really like what the approach Oda did with her. Lots of minimalistic touches, but just substantiate her further and further, and some great progression for her. Oh, and something else to note, Igaram and Princess Vivi have this giant bird thing that they ride as transportation called Karu. It reminds me of chocobos from Final Fantasy. I wonder if that was an inspiration, but either way, Karu ends up being notable, and I forgot to mention his introduction. There are some funny, humorous Nami and Zoro interactions which I found to be very nice. I do like their dynamic. It's one of the more understated ones. It's not hugely prominent at the moment, but they have really humorous stuff and a fun dynamic for sure. But what I really liked here was Miss Wednesday, or Princess Vivi, and Igaram blindsided the people they were working with within the organization of Baroque Works. The lower numbers, or rather the higher numbers, the lower ranks of Baroque Works. They blindsided them. They weren't aware of their true identities and purposes, but they grew a sense of camaraderie regardless. And so these people who they were working with, Mr. Nine, Miss Monday, to name a couple, they didn't know what was going on, but what they did know was that they wanted to protect her. They wanted to protect the princess, even though that wasn't their job. Due to bonds rather than blood. Again, that sort of theme that pops up every now and then throughout One Piece. Found family, blood not being as important as the bonds shared. And so it was kind of touching a little bit to see these people defend Vivi and Igaram just because they wanted them to be okay, even if it was a quote-unquote betrayal, I guess. Then more details about Baroque Works are unveiled. Again, it's said that it's a secret organization, but it's so secretive that no one knows what the boss even looks like. Orders are given remotely through a bunch of liaisons or conduits or whatever, but none of these people at these ranks know what the boss looks like. And the ultimate goal of Baroque Works, through espionage, through these secretive operations, whatever it may be, all of this, is to create a utopia. Their ambition is to create this place, to create this utopia through rising up the ranks in the world through any means possible, through all these operations, these covert operations that are set out by the head of the totem pole. And the members are then promised prominent positions in that utopia. And it's also established that the closer their number is to 0, the higher in rank they are. So Mr. Zero is the head of Baroque Works. He's the boss. And also along with that, it doesn't just show seniority and rank. The lower your number is, it shows the more powerful you are. So the lower your number, the higher rank you are, and also the more powerful you are. It's very meritocratic in that way. The secrecy, the espionage, and then the roles of the people having aliases within the organization, and then the roles and being ranked by position as a result of your strength or power. it's very meritocratic, and so we don't know a ton about deeply rooted specifics and or the origin of Baroque works, or the true identity of why it was formed, or like the specifics, basically. We know their goal, we know how they operate generally, but we don't know the specifics. But I think there are little hints here and there about these meritocratic systems that may hint at the ideals of the origin, which seems to be Mr. Zero. Anyways, we get that information, and then we get to what I was told is a very infamous scene. Luffy versus Zoro. I was told by a bunch of people in chat that this is their least favorite part of the whole story, that they hate it, that it's very out of character, that they despise this, that Luffy's randomly just acting like he's from a different story, that Oda was pressured into writing this. I don't know the truth about about the specifics behind why this was written. Who knows? I was told that Oda was forced into, by his publisher, by Jump, forced into writing a fight between Luffy and Zoro, and that just wasn't in the plans for the story, and so we had to fabricate one in this way. I don't know if that's true. It would make sense because Shonen Jump has done that with series that I've heard about, in nudging story certain directions in ways that maybe the writer, the mangaka, didn't really prefer. I don't know if any of that's true. It doesn't really matter to me much. I just found it interesting because people really didn't like this. They consider this very out of character for Luffy, and I'm curious about your guys' thoughts. Essentially what happens is Luffy wakes up finally, he sees the carnage of all the people that Zoro defeated, and goes, "They welcomed us in. They welcomed us into their home, and you chopped them up. I can't forgive that. I'm really upset at you, so we gotta fight." And Luffy legit wants to fight him to the death here. So wanting to kill Zoro, is that out of character for Luffy? Yes. Now, the stuff surrounding it, outside of wanting to literally kill Zoro, it seems plausible to me. It stretches the realms of believability, maybe, in that he wasn't willing to listen to Zoro, he wasn't willing to listen to reason, he wasn't open to that, especially when we see a situation in the next arc, or maybe 2 arcs, soon enough, we see a situation where he's very open to learning. Oh, that was the beginning of Drum Island, so I'm getting ahead of myself. But he's shown himself to be open to perspective and open to learning. So yeah, that stretches the realms of his believability of his character, but I just saw it as him waking up on the wrong side of the bed. We all have those days. Maybe we don't all try to kill our kindred spirit brother. Maybe that was a bit much. Yeah, it's not good. It's not good writing. But I don't think it's horrendous, on the grand scale of things. Luffy's not listening, he's being stupid, he's being bullheaded, he's just being dumb. He's just being dumb, and it is what it is. It's a chapter where they're fighting each other for stupid reasons, and people hate it because Luffy's acting very out of character, and I get that. But to me, honestly, if I didn't know about the reception of this chapter, I wouldn't have given it a second glance. I wouldn't have thought of it as this huge low point for the series. I would just read it and go, oh, that's weird. Yeah, that's not very good. I'm not a fan of this chapter. But whatever. Most of it is somewhat believable outside of wanting to kill Zoro. I just imagine it as Luffy having a bad day, being in a daze, just being stupid, having a moment. It's a breather. It gives some respite. It gives some humor in that way, because clearly this isn't a fight that's meant to be taken seriously. It's just dumb humor. It's not a big deal to me. Do I think it's good? No. I just find it very interesting that people look at this as an example of something totally horrendous within the story. I wouldn't have thought of it twice. I wouldn't have thought of it as this huge blemish on the series at all, and I still don't. But it's interesting that people do. I do think a part of it was out of character, but most of it I was just like, okay, whatever. Yeah, that's my take on it. I just kind of shrugged it off. But I'm interested to see what you guys think. Judging by a lot of people in my Twitch chat, a lot of people just hate that, but let me know what you think about this little fight. A cool little detail throughout it, though, is that they're fighting each other, because Zoro has to engage eventually, and he's just angry at Luffy, and the real fight, the real antagonists, Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine, they go to attack them, and then Zoro and Luffy are like, "You're interrupting our fight," and there's a great spread of them just kind of hitting them off to the distance, Team Rocket style. Which shows, again, the scale of our protagonist's strength. Even these people who are higher ranked than the likes of Mr. 9, they just don't measure up at all. So our protagonists are pretty strong. But anyway, that fight's done, it's all resolved, and then at the end of it, we get some more details about Vivi's situation and what our protagonists need to know about escorting her to Alabasta, potentially. And what Vivi says is that Alabasta was once a peaceful place. A huge contrast to today. Today it's full of conflict. But it wasn't always that way, and it became that way because Baroque works worked their way in and stirred up discontent, and slowly from the inside out stirred up this conflict. So the reason she worked undercover and joined them is to uncover their secrets, their motives. And upon being asked about the identity of Mr. Zero and what he's like, she goes, I can't let you know about that. If you know this, you're automatically marked for death. You'll be hunted down, and he is so far beyond your strength, which again shows the scale here. But so yeah, Vivi says, I can't tell you his name. You knowing his name will make it so that you're hunted down, and you're no match for him. You're no match for Sir Crocodile. It's a great comedic little scene there. Their jaws just drop, Nami's is down to the floor, and Zoro just goes, you just told us. And Luffy's just got a kind of bewildered look on his face. And the Unluckies were listening in, and they heard his name, so they go off to report it. So yeah, they are automatically marked for death. Nami, poor Nami, is super upset about this. Like she says, there's no profit going to help this kingdom in chaos. But Luffy and Zoro, they thrive in chaos. They're like, I'm totally down. I want to do it. Let's check it out. And what's actually another little detail about Sir Crocodile is that he's one of the 7 warlords. So we now have 2 confirmed. I was speculating about maybe Shanks and Yasop were maybe part of them because Mihawk had some camaraderie with them, or familiarity at least. But what's confirmed in the end is that Sir Croc and Mihawk are 2 of the 7. 2 of the 7 warlords, 2 of the 7 government dogs. So that's interesting. Really want to learn more about him so that we can in turn learn more about the nature and culture of the 7 warlords. And we learn that Sir Croc has an 80 million bounty on his head, which is wild. Almost 3 times as much as Luffy, and 4 times as much as the next biggest bounty, which is Arlong's at 20. So I'm not using this as a scale for power scaling, but it just shows the immense threat and potential darkness, the scale of the threat and darkness of these characters. That's what I'm using it for right now. We'll see how that develops as things go on. But then Igaram, bless his soul, wears a Princess Vivi disguise. Igaram's intention is to divert their attention, Baroque Works' attention, and to allow them to sneak by. And so he leaves, he sails on the horizon. This seems to be the course of action. He'll take their attention, he'll escape them, or let them chase him for as long as is possible and be a diversion, while they go to Alabasta. And it's all set up for the next arc to be in Alabasta as they arrive there. And then his ship blows up immediately. He sets off on his voyage, and right away his ship blows up and he dies. There's a great shot, a really bold shadowed shot of a boom behind the Straw Hats as they look on the horizon. It's a tempest of fire, it's a tempest of flames, and Igaram immediately dies, to Princess Vivi's sheer horror. And that immediately shows you that they don't screw around at all. They don't screw around at all. They're willing to do whatever they can, disproportionate things, to carry out their goals and create this utopia. They waste no time, they just straight up destroy him. And this is serious. The stakes have instantly switched. And so Nami, who had previously been crying and going, oh, I want to leave, oh, they're after us, this dangerous person's after us, whatever, I want to go home, and crying. In the face of this happening, of Princess Vivi losing someone who's probably the most important person in the world to her, maybe, at least one of them. In response to that, Nami flicks a switch, sort of hugs Princess Vivi to her, to comfort her a little bit, as she bites her lip, Princess Vivi, as she bites her lip so hard that it bleeds, in grief for Igaram, for her homeland potentially. And then Nami takes her in and says, don't worry, we'll take you to Alabasta. And the crew all gathers together. Nami comforts Vivi by saying that they saved the East Blue all by themselves. The 7 warlords of the sea, no problem. Even though Sanji and Usopp are still passed out, and Zoro and Luffy have to go get them, Nami just gives glowing endorsements for them. It's no problem. These are the guys that saved the All Blue. It's indicative of her connection with them, her confidence with them, how it's grown, and how much she admires them on some level, you know? Nami knows when things come down to it, when the stakes are at their highest, back against the wall, that is when people are most serious, that is when they say what's most close to their heart, that's when they say the things that are most indicative. And what Nami says here is that you can trust these people. They're people you can put your life in the hands of, and they will do whatever they can to help you, to protect you. And I love that. I love that Nami has this connection with them. It's so genuine. It's from pre-Arlong Park, where she had buffered herself from them, to now, she has just true confidence and admiration for these people that she's now calls her found family. And she transmits that, or conveys that, to Vivi. And I love it, because it's comforting them, it's indicative of her bonds with them, and how far that's come, how far that maybe will go eventually. Again, great little details for Nami throughout this. But then we see a shadowy figure of a woman who ends up on their boat, who just says, "A decoy? How silly." And that was a hell of an introduction. This woman, her eyes shadowed over, bold lines, just darkness everywhere, in the middle of these blazes, this blazing inferno, roughly drawn intentionally, just to show this immense aura and threat. And her name ends up being Miss All Sunday. I speculated about her identity a little bit on stream. I'm not going to say it here because that might bring spoilers or something like that. I'm not going to say it here, but knowing the little bits of what I do know about the future of the story and certain characters, I immediately thought this was someone else. That's all I'll say. We'll see how that goes. But she's introduced as Miss All Sunday. She's condescending in a way. She's kind of playfully yet malevolently talking down to the crew in a really deliciously dark way, but I was immediately sold that she was a big player, she was a threat, and that ends up being the case because she is Sir Crocodile's number 2. She's second in command. It's pretty immense, and she just continuously talks with this superiority. She finds them beneath her. She finds them amusing, like an amusing distraction. She has a bit of an ego, and she steals Luffy's hat, being very symbolic of perhaps a gulf here, perhaps what she can get away with at this moment in time, perhaps the scale, the difference. I don't know, that seemed like a big moment of her taking Luffy's hat and putting it on. Very different complexion from when Luffy gave it to Nami, the symbol of his dream forcibly taken from him, and her wielding it. That speaks for itself, and it again sells the scale of the Grand Line. Lovely little detail. This is, if you can't tell, this is the best part of Whisky Peak for me. And she trivializes Vivi's ambitions to save her kingdom, just saying it's pathetic, which enrages Vivi. It's a nice little introductory arc for Vivi and what her ambitions are and where her heart truly lies. And what's interesting is that Igaram, upon departing, says, "You must do whatever you can to get back home and to set things in order and to save our kingdom. If you have to betray these people," is the implication there. If you have to be brutal and cutthroat and devious, do whatever you can, you just need to get back home. And you can see how much that means to her, how much her home means to her, through that and through this. Oh, and Miss All Sunday also has devil fruit powers. Forgot to mention that. And so what Miss All Sunday reveals to them is that on the way to Alabasta, if they follow their log pose, it's going to take them directly into danger, into a place called Little Garden. She says that they're not ready for that, so she gives them an eternal pose to skip that. To skip it and go straight to Alabasta. It's for her amusement, it's for fun, it's her being condescending again, but the fact is, it is easier to get to Alabasta using it. It's just the fact. It may be a trap, but nonetheless, it coincides with their goal. But Luffy, in what is a very Luffy move, takes it in his hands and crushes it, saying that he doesn't want someone else dictating where he goes. She's not deciding what course we take. Even if our course is more difficult, at least it's our course. We're doing it on our own terms. Luffy needs this agency. He needs it to be their journey. He doesn't want that to be controlled by someone else. And I love it. It's so raw. And Miss All Sunday then says that she doesn't have a problem with forceful men, and she says, "We'll meet again if you survive." The crew are now on their way to Little Garden, en route to Alabasta, with Raftel looming way in the distance, and with Miss All Sunday and Sir Crocodile a bit closer, but still looming in the distance. I love how these hooks are layered. They're staggered, they're staggered. Immediately looming ahead is Alabasta and what's going on with Miss All Sunday and Sir Crocodile, and all of that. But that's still in the future. Then beyond that is the idea of Raftel, that island that only Gold Roger has gotten to. Then I imagine beyond that is the dreams of all the crew. Become the greatest swordsman, find the All Blue, etc. So there's layers of hooks and ongoing goals here that are established by Oda that I really appreciate a lot. But that's where they set off to. Next stop, Little Garden. And so that was Whisky Peak. Like I said, probably my least favorite arc, and the plot within it just seems like a conduit for setting up future stuff, having to do with Little Garden, having to do with Alabasta when they get there, Miss All Sunday, the threat ahead of them. It was also a vehicle for cool Zoro stuff, and for Luffy and Zoro to have a random one-chapter fight. And it laid some foundations for some bounty stuff, and yeah, it did a lot of important things. It was very functional, but it was probably the arc I enjoyed the least. It was good for Igaram. He was short-lived, but a solid character. It was good for Vivi as well. And then Miss All Sunday is a great hook. Sir Crocodile's a great hook. That stuff is really good. But yeah, for this arc, while it does do that important work, it was pretty thin overall in terms of thematic substance and character work, and that's fine. That's fine. But it just, because of that, it just wasn't really up my alley a ton. While I did appreciate the functional stuff, it just wasn't really up my alley. But that's fine. Not everything has to be catered to me, and it definitely served a very important purpose. Overall, I give this like a light 6 or something out of 10. Light 6, that's about right. And then we go on to Little Garden, the final arc. I think I'll be able to do it in this video. Not sure how long this is going to end up being, but we're doing it. So, Little Garden. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It again does a lot of the setup things that the previous 2 arcs do, but unlike Whisky Peak and like Reverse Mountain, it has a self-contained thematic plot and story within itself. So it sets up things for future stuff, but here there is more meat and substance and weight throughout the whole thing, which I appreciated. We get a lot of interesting creativity and world building, and I just love to see how this island functioned. This island stuck in time, which we'll get into in a bit, but it was just really cool. We had the giants Broggy and Dory and their culture and what was going on there. How this arc actually connected a lot with Usopp in some ways and Syrup Village, which was very cool. And then there's lots of neat little character bits. Vivi becomes more prominent and we learn more about her. Like I alluded to, Usopp gets some stuff, some quite nice stuff. Nami, Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, they all get nice little tidbits that progress them a little bit. And then there's some antagonist stuff. I don't have too much to say about that. We have Mr. 3, who's the most prominent antagonist, I guess I would say. And then some stuff that, again, does more long-term hooking in and drawing you in stuff. But overall, it was a very cohesive arc. Again, setup is a big function of it, but nonetheless, I enjoyed it a lot because of the way it set things up, and because it also had its own identity as well. Something that hinges thematically on the idea of fighting for honor, fighting for your ideals, bravery, courage, how all those things intertwine, and basically what the giants represent, and how that coalesces with a lot of the ways that the crew thinks. And then we also end with some nice ominous threat for Miss All Sunday and Sir Crocodile. But let's get into it. So we start, Karu has also joined the crew. I forgot to mention it, but he joined them on the boat, and they're all celebrating and having a good time and taking it easy, and Vivi is a little on edge, understandably. But Nami just kind of smiles to her and just says, relax, you can be at ease here, or as at ease as is possible given your situation. And she looks at them and she smiles so big, and she just says, don't your cares just melt away on a ship like this? And it's such a genuine smile, coming from someone who, again, like we talked about in Arlong Park, was not able to genuinely smile for years on end, who is now just feels so warm and welcomed into this place, that she's found this family. And it's just lovely to compare where she was compared to where she is now. But they make their way into Little Garden, where they have to stay as the log pose recalibrates. And Little Garden looks great. There's a lot of depth and verticality to it. There's layers to the trees. It just feels rich and deep, like a lush jungle. It was drawn really well. And Karu, Vivi, and Luffy all decide to go on an adventure to explore the island. The first thing I said in response to that was, that doesn't sound smart. But hey, go for it, I guess. And Sanji and Zoro then decide to have a little competitive hunt to see who can get the bigger catch, which leaves Usopp and Nami by themselves. My poor king, my poor queen. Not that they have romantic interest, but you get what I mean. And then it's established that this Little Garden is a prehistoric land sort of caught in time, stopped in time like I alluded to earlier. It's explained and it makes sense due to the Grand Line's variable climate and unpredictability with regards to the weather and geography, and how tons of different types of islands can exist in relatively close proximity to one another, and they can all have sort of totally different ecosystems, totally different climates and weathers and geography because of the way the climate works here. And that alone is such a cool idea for establishing how variable each one can be. There's so much potential here. Like, if this is possible, this land stuck in time of prehistoric dinosaurs and everything, what else? What else could there be? The possibilities are endless. The only ceiling here is Oda's creativity, which has been established to be pretty damn high, so I'm excited to see what a lot of these further islands down the road in the Grand Line have to offer. And it establishes this scale and sense of adventure and variability to the environments, and it's just so cool. I really love that. And it's all natural, it all fits. It isn't just, there are rules within the world. It's not that Oda just says, yeah, just because all these islands can be totally different from one another because I want to be creative. No. It makes sense given the rules about the Grand Line that have been established. The boundaries of those rules allow for tons of creativity within them. But it's not that there aren't rules, so it just makes things feel a lot more cohesive. It makes things feel like there's thought behind it, like there's an order to the chaos. But so yeah, this is a little garden to its inhabitants, not to the outsiders. To the outsiders, Little Garden is full of huge threats. So they all explore the island, they're all doing their own thing. I enjoyed that aspect of it a lot. There are some cute little tidbits throughout, as everyone's doing their own thing. Usopp and Nami see a giant named Broggy, and Luffy and Karu and Vivi see another giant named Dory. And it's brought to the fore that Broggy and Dory are two giants of an ancient tribe who have been fighting for ages as warriors of Elbaf, E-L-B-A-F. Now that's obviously Fable spelt backwards, which is the first allusion to Syrup Village. The idea of tall tales, the extreme nature of some of the tales that Usopp would tell the people of Syrup Village to enrapture them in the beauty of these quote-unquote lies. Fables, stories, Syrup Village, that whole theme, and that whole beauty of storytelling. You know, I think of Fable as applied to One Piece, and it immediately evokes that theme. And you know, this is an exaggeratory island. This island stuck in time where dinosaurs and giants roam. That sounds like a story, I know it wasn't, but that sounds like a story that Usopp would have told someone back home at Syrup Village. And so it just automatically, immediately kind of keys you into that idea of associating this with some stuff to do with Syrup Village, which is very important, because that ended up being very key. It's explained here that the log pose resets after 1 year, so they're gonna have to be waiting here for a while, which sucks. And Dory gets more into the explanation of why he and Broggy have been fighting forever. What happens is that whenever the volcano goes off, that is like the alarm clock to signal them to fight each other. But they've drawn consistently for years. There's never been a winner. And what is said here is the reason we fight is long forgotten, but they just do it anyway. They go through the motions. And I love that theme. That is a peak theme. You think of stories like Attack on Titan, that's the first thing that comes to mind when it comes to this theme. The idea of people just constantly fighting, perpetuating this cycle of violence or combat or whatever, and the original reason for that cycle being long forgotten, just going through the motions, it being baseless with regards to the origin of why it happened in the first place. But that theme is tackled in a very One Piece specific way here, because Vivi, being sort of the audience insert in this way, says, that's ridiculous. Why are you fighting if you don't know why? Which is the way that that theme is tackled a lot whenever you see it in media. Like, it's stupid, it's pointless, there's no point to it, why continue? It usually fixates on the idea that these people have no other states that they feel comfortable in, but it's criticized. It's thought of as this terrible thing, you know? But when Vivi questions why they do it, without knowing the origin of why, Luffy says it doesn't matter. Putting their pride on the line is reason enough for them to fight. Now, firstly, this is again consistent with Luffy. We know that Luffy is a huge advocate of pride, a huge advocate of putting your life on the line for something that you deem as deeply important, and so he is someone that is going to understand this. This way of thinking, in a way, directly connects with a lot of the ways that Luffy conceptualizes fighting and life in general, and what you would do to put your life on the line, and Zoro as well, as illustrated in Baratie. But also what I like about this is that through this we understand Vivi's leadership a bit better. We understand that she does not advocate this sort of fighting for no reason. She doesn't like conflict, which we knew already, but she doesn't like this ceaseless fighting with no point. If there's gonna be fighting, there has to be a point to it, and if there is, get it over with quickly. She doesn't at this moment have that spirit within her. And so this is a nice little glimpse into her world. Then we get a bit of a quick stop in with Miss Golden Week and Mr. 3, who are the next steps on the totem pole for the Baroque works, as they end up being the primary antagonists for this. Like I said, I don't have much to say about them. Their powers are creative and interesting. I don't find the characters to be that interesting, to be honest. I don't have much to say about Miss Golden Week, and Mr. 3 had a bit of an interesting tinge to him through his fixation on art. To skip ahead a little bit, he has this power to do with wax, where he makes wax figures and works of art out of the enemies that he fights, and he has this sadistic, almost borderline psychotic obsession with making art and making masterpieces out of his conflicts. And I found that to be an interesting element, I guess. It was new, it was different, and I appreciated that. That aside though, I really don't have much to say about both antagonists here. They do the job, but I would be lying if I said I found them super engaging. But then to go back to the Giants and their philosophy, their honor as warriors, their fights. The volcano goes off and then the Giants begin fighting each other. And then Usopp, in witnessing this, sees this is the example of something I'd like to be. Usopp's goal is to become a brave warrior of the sea. And so he looks at them and their fighting and their bravery and their philosophy and their ideals and how they put their life on the line in this way. And he says, I want to be a man of honor like these guys. He sees the philosophy that Luffy and Zoro have. Again, it's not one-to-one, but I think there's a similar sentimental core to it. And he eventually catches up to them in viewing this example and seeing, yeah, this is what I want to be. This is it. This is my ideal. And he says, if there's a whole village of people like this, I want to visit them. Which is a nice hint to maybe a future arc down the line. And Usopp, again in contrast to Vivi, thinks about how they don't even know why they're fighting and sees such value in it, sees such bravery in it, sees what he isn't in that, and looks at it as a standard to aspire to. And what I like about this as well is that you have the counterweight to that in Nami and Vivi, both of whom think this is ridiculous. They can't handle this warrior stuff, they think it's stupid, and again, it shows Oda's ability to show multiple perspectives, to have some characters champion something, and then through counterpoints or perspectives that don't buy into that, admit that this is not the only way to view life, and it just adds to that richness and breadth and depth to the series that I really appreciate. And so just to make sure, Vivi, after the fight, asks, is it true that the log pose resets after 1 year? To which it said, yeah, it does. And then she despairs because she wonders how Alabasta will look like in 1 year. Luffy despairs because he'll be bored, stuck here for a year. The contrast there is pretty hilarious, though a bit dark when you think about Vivi. But then Usopp asks about all these ideals and philosophies from the Giants because he just wants to know. And so it's said that as warriors of Elbaf, if they die with honor, death can be glorious. That honor will become a treasure of their homeland. It's an encapsulation of the honor idea, of what you fight for. Very similar to, again, what we've seen so far. And what I see to be one of the main primary ideas and themes of this arc. And then Usopp says, so honor is a treasure. And so I wonder, Usopp is the one person on the crew without a literal dream to aspire for, and that dream being his treasure. He wants to become brave. He wants to become a brave warrior of the sea. That's more abstract than the rest of the crew's dreams. So I wonder, is honor going to be something he conceptualizes as that treasure? It's still more abstract, but it's a bit more specific than becoming brave. Becoming honorable? Maybe that'll be another element to it, becoming brave and honorable? I don't know, but I don't think it's a coincidence that his goal is the most abstract, and as I've talked about in previous videos, he is the one most primed for, in my opinion, the most interesting sort of coming-of-age tale. Zoro's path is interesting, but for other reasons. Luffy's path is super interesting, but for reasons apart from it being coming of age. To me, Usopp is primed through this abstract goal of learning about himself, maybe more than anyone else. I really hope so. And so the way that he grapples with his ideas of who he wants to be and sees examples of this through the Giants, and then conceptualizes honor as a treasure and grapples with it, it's so human and it's so indicative of him trying to find an identity and finding his place in this world and learning how to be what he wants to be. At the end of Arlong Park, he was able to make a big stride in being courageous despite his fear. This is another one in better conceptualizing the type of person he wants to become. But it's worth saying that that mentality is dangerous. It's dangerous for Luffy and Zoro for their lives, and so something very similar here is very dangerous for Usopp, so this can be a double-edged sword. We'll have to see where it goes, and I don't imagine that Usopp's journey will be linear or straightforward, so he'll probably stumble, and I wonder if it'll have to do with this. Dory has some ale. The ale explodes while in his stomach, and he is not looking good. He accuses Luffy of it. Luffy gets mad that he would accuse him, and Luffy decides to fight a giant. I don't have much to say about that. That is the most Luffy sentence I've ever said in my life. But he takes off his hat, which a nice little touch is he takes off his hat and he gives it to Vivi. I don't think I mentioned it before, but Luffy tends to take off his hat for fights, from what I remember, to protect it. It's his treasure, obviously. He wants it to remain safe, which makes sense. But what I find is very key is that he hands it to Vivi, meaning that that's a subtle indication that I trust you with my treasure, which is nice. I like that their relationship has progressed in that way so that he trusts her. Now, I don't think there was any alternative to give the hat to other than maybe Karu, but nonetheless, he trusts it with her. So they fight, though. Luffy fights the giant, Luffy fights Dory. He says sorry in the middle of the fight. He gets pegged back, he gets hit back, and Vivi asks him if he's okay, and Luffy's first question is the giant okay? He's more worried about the giant's well-being than his own, which shows that this isn't a fight out of malice or ill intent or him hating Dory. It was a slight on his honor, on his pride, and he couldn't take that lying down, but nonetheless, that doesn't mean he wants to kill him, which adds a bit of fuel to the fire for him being very out of character in his fight with Zoro in Whisky Peak. But it's very clear that knowing that Baroque works are on the island, they're likely the ones that poisoned the ale. It's also established that these giants were once members of a giant pirate crew. They were warrior leaders. And again, they don't remember why they were fighting, but the volcano is their call, and they must answer, and no matter what they have to fight, this is their warrior's honor. They say that if they don't fight, they lose their name as a warrior, and to lose that is to lose their very sense of self. They conflate their identity as a warrior, as a person, the purpose of their existence, with their honor, which is tied directly to them taking up the call. Again, there are shades and parallels with Luffy, his fixation on treasure and dreams and pride, just executed in a little bit of a different way and taken to a bit more of an extreme than Luffy, which is saying a hell of a lot. And what I like about this is he can observe something that is reminiscent of his own psychology and his own ideals from an external position. And I wondered as I was reading, is this going to give him a broader perspective of the type of person that he is to other people? Will he realize flaws maybe? Will he change? The possibility was there in my mind. It was a remote possibility. I don't think that'll end up panning out to much, but it's just a thought. And I would be amiss if I didn't say this line from Usopp. It's great, and it's literally what he wants to be, just summed up very poetically. He says, "Even if someday I lose everything and face death alone on a deserted isle, I'll die proud of the way I lived and say, I am Usopp, a brave warrior of the sea." I love Usopp. But back to the giants' fight. They realize that Luffy did not give them the ale or intend to harm them. I think this is Dory. I'm pretty sure this is Dory who says that, and he says, "Forgive me for suspecting you." And then he says, "This just must have been the judgment of Elbaf, the god of war. Divine protection was not with me, that's all." To which Luffy is very upset. He spits on the idea of divine protection and gods. He doesn't buy into that at all. He says, "Would you give up your life because the gods want you to?" And what I see here, what I see the distinction as, because here Luffy says something that's against the idea of them giving up their lives. Because he says, would you just give up your lives for the sake of gods telling you to? But the distinction here is that I don't think Luffy has a problem with someone giving up their life. This is Luffy, of course. Physical lives are secondary to ideals. But it's again sort of indicative of what he said to Sanji about him giving up his life for stupid reasons. Give up your life for something that's worth giving it up for. Give up your life if it's your own decision, if it's under your own control. And so I think the problem Luffy has here is the concept of them giving up their lives because gods tell them to, not because they themselves want to put their life on the line for their honor, for their dream. It being controlled by this external source is so blasphemous to Luffy. He hates that. He can't stand that. And I think that links back with the idea that he wants everything and is an advocate of everything the way a human exists to be on their own terms. This is why he destroyed the eternal log pose when it was given to him by Miss All Sunday. He didn't want someone else dictating his fate. He's so against the idea of that, and he is a huge advocate of personal agency. So I think the combination of these two elements in these two arcs have kind of revealed a new side to Luffy that I didn't think too much about before. I'm sure it was present before, I just never really attended to it, but I'm paying attention to it now, and it just adds more and more richness to this character, and it's all integrative. You know, I don't think it makes him immediately more complex. I think it makes him deeper, because it's still relatively cohesive and integrative and, again, simple, but that's what I love about him. I don't think that he's rudimentary, but I do think he has a lot to him, and it all feeds together in a very simple, straightforward, honest way. But Luffy, again, to go back to this, he doesn't care about gods. He doesn't care about any of that. He's just annoyed because a warrior's pride and honor has been tampered with by external forces, which end up being Baroque works, and what they did with the ale. And Luffy is just enraged at this idea. He can't take it lying down. He's so upset about it. It's an insult. And despite him not knowing the giants that well, he takes this almost personally, on their behalf almost. Because I think he feels bad for them, of course, but I think it's also just an affront against everything he stands for. And what I like is that Vivi is watching on at Luffy being so enraged at this, just kind of thinking and observing and appraising him and wondering. But Baroque works, true to what we know about them already, are interfering with this fight for a bounty for the giants that's been out there since the inception of their fights because of them being pirate warriors. And in the midst of this, another interesting thing about that I want to note about Mr. 3, you know, there are elements to him that I think are noteworthy, is that he says here, "My motto is improvise and conquer. There are countless ways to defeat an enemy without fighting." So it just lends you an eye into his type of mentality. You know, he has this sort of fixation on art and the lyricism and poetry of destruction or death, but he's also very cerebral. And he likes the psychological warfare as well, which is very loyal to the idea of Baroque works, I think, at least what's been established so far. There's some more hijinks. Nami gets apparently eaten. It's speculated that that was the result of Baroque works knowing who she is and taking her. And Usopp learns about the ale exploding in Dory's stomach and is deeply upset, just like Luffy was, because of how he pinned his hopes on them, on the giants, how he looked at them with wide-eyed wonder. He's desperate for the fight to not end with this tampering, just as Luffy is, because he's so invested in it, and this fight represents, it's like an encapsulation of the sanctity of his new dream, like his new complexion on his dream, and what he wants to become. So he's desperate for it to not end like this. It ending in this way would destroy him because of what it represents for his dream. And so we have him and Luffy who both want this underhandedness to stop. Then we get to a point where Mr. 5 hurts Karu, is basically torturing it, which is horrendous, horrible. That was difficult to read, as bait for Luffy to come out of the word work and for it to lure him there so he can fight and so they can capture him. And Usopp and Luffy, they take the bait. They want to fight them just because they're horrible people in general. They're just sick of them for disrupting the battle, for being terrible, everything. They just oppose everything they are. And Mr. 3, this is kind of playing into his hands because he wants Vivi and Luffy captured. Vivi being the princess of Alabasta, obviously that is conducive to their plans for her to be captured, given what's happening at her kingdom, and then Luffy for the bounty. So they get captured eventually, and they let slip that Zoro was captured as well. And then I love this line from Luffy where he says, "Zoro, you captured Zoro? You're doomed." We then have a moment where Broggy reflects, and the ale that ended up hurting Dory was given to him by him as a gift of their friendship. It was obviously tampered with by Baroque works, but he feels bad because he physically handed it to him, so he feels a bit of guilt. And I don't think I mentioned this, but they fought after it had been tampered with and after he was injured. And so Broggy knew something was wrong with Dory. He just wasn't fighting normally. He was clearly hurt, but he didn't want to mention anything, and he didn't want to try less than his 100% because of how it would dent his opponent's pride, his friend's pride. Again, that fixation on honor, on pride. But now knowing what happened and the reason behind this, he wants to punish Baroque works. And so things are kind of coming to a head here. Luffy, Usopp, and Karu kind of band together. Broggy wants to fight as well. And then we have a scene where Mr. 3 captures Zoro, Vivi, and Nami and begins pouring wax down on them. And they're going, ah, it's so hot, ah, no, I'm gonna die, ah. And Zoro's just like... One of the funniest moments in One Piece so far. I was dying. Nami suffering, Vivi suffering, Zoro just... Okay. Damn. He is unbothered. And this is kind of where Mr. Three's sadistic fixation on art through his combat and through his power is kind of alluded upon. And then Zoro, in the midst of all this, eventually decides, my legs are stuck here. I think I need to chop off my legs to escape. Right, okay. And so he starts cutting at his legs, which inspires then Broggy, who is also kind of captured and being rained down on by wax. This inspires him as well. Again, that nature of Zoro to inspire and kind of disarm people around him. He did this with the shopkeep in Logtown. He does this with Broggy here, just through his sheer spirit. And what's notable is that Vivi was about to do it too. She was about to follow Zoro's lead, which shows that she has determination. She's willing to do what needs to be done if need be. And that's a hell of a step, to be honest. But it turns out they don't actually need to. They started doing it. Zoro had cut half through his leg, but Luffy, Kadu, and Usopp had escaped and came just in the nick of time. And Luffy asked Zoro if he was in danger, and Zoro goes, nope, even though he hacked through half his leg. I love him. And so the flow of the fight kind of stalls a little bit, it plateaus, and Zoro ends up just going, crap, I think we're still gonna be encased in wax here, okay. And so he holds his sword up, just like this. And he says, if I die as a candle, I at least want to be in a really cool pose. To which Nami plays the straight man brilliantly. Her reactions to the nonsense of the people in her crew, they're consistently amazing. And it was amazing here. I was laughing so much at this. This was amazing. It was hilarious. Zoro peak comedy here. In the midst of this, Usopp stands up. He's acting quite brave. He's taking a stand. He's embodying what he wants to be, which I think is quite significant for him. And eventually, through classic One Piece stuff, they free them from the wax. And Luffy begins fighting with Mr. 3, but then Miss Golden Week uses her power on Luffy, which leads to even more hilarious comedy. So I mentioned Miss Golden Week as a character, and she wasn't very interesting, I said, but I did say that her powers were very creative. This is it. So it's essentially like a betrayal thing. It's a betrayal power that essentially gets Luffy to be hypnotized, which again alludes to the weakness to hypnosis that was established that Luffy had in Syrup Village from Django. So nice little attention to detail there. But it results in such hilarious hijinks. I was dying. Because, and the moment that really got me was, his friends are dying. Normally Luffy would just go out there and save them, but because of the mind control or the hypnosis here, he's tricked by the calming green betrayal power thing, and he's just sipping tea with Miss Golden Week, and he just goes, the tea is good. It's not, the way I describe it is not funny at all, but the way it works on the page from panel to panel and just the reveal of him doing that is too much. It was killing me. And I heard it was great in the anime too. I should watch that. But through the tea is good stuff, you can see Luffy straining, and he's trying to work through the hypnosis, and he's like, I gotta fight, I gotta help my friends. Zoro's still posing. Peak comedy, I'm telling you. This arc was hilarious. And then Usopp snaps Luffy out of it. My king snaps my other king out of it. And then so all this chaos is going on, and then we go back to a different part of the island by the ship with Sanji. Sanji has been waiting this entire time, waiting by the ship, just vibing, I guess, which is again hilarious. This arc has probably the highest concentration of good comedy of anything so far. And as Luffy and Usopp melt everyone out of the candles, the wax, sorry, Sanji's just doing his thing. We also get in the midst of this a new cover story. So we move on from Kobe and Helmeppo and Garp to Django, which is another allusion to Syrup Village, and he's stranded, or he's on a boat somewhere out in sea, and things progress in the cover stories with Django, and he eventually reaches Syrup Village once more. So we'll see the developments there. It was pointed out, at first I just thought it was a random bar, but it was pointed out to me that Onion, one of Usopp's crew, saw him in that bar, meaning that it was at Syrup Village. So that's cool. Cover stories continue to be integrative and great for the background stuff going on in the world. And the conflict continues to ensue. It's just pure chaos. Usopp's fighting, and he has a great line where he just says, I'm a fibber. So he said that he had let out a certain version of his power. The name escapes me. but it ended up being a different version, which caught his opponent off guard. It was really good. He just says, "I'm a fibber." Again, an allusion to Usopp, Syrup Village, fables, stories, etc. Django in the cover stories, the giants and honor, and how that alludes to the bravery that Usopp wants to personify. It's all great integration with a lot of the ideas of Syrup Village. And there will be more. Zoro just does Zoro stuff. Usopp, in the midst of this, calls the giants master. And there's some more honor talk, just kind of expanding upon a lot of the stuff we talked about before. Luffy makes his way to Mr. 3 for the final confrontation in his wax museum of sorts. But we go back with Sanji, who continues to be vibing, and arguably the most important stuff in this arc happens to Sanji as he's vibing. He stumbles into the Baroque Works telephone and ends up answering a call that was intended for Mr. 3 from Mr. Zero, Sir Crocodile. And Sanji stays calm and collected and cool, understanding what's going on here, but wary at the same time, but listening, because this is very important stuff. And he learns that an eternal pose is going to be delivered to the Baroque Works people that are situated in Little Garden. And the eternal pose is going to lead to Alabasta. So Sanji is told, assuming he's Mr. 3, to wait there and await orders. But this is very important. This is an eternal pose going directly to Alabasta, which is key, which was lost to them. And then we get some beautiful little panels that are so ominous from Sir Crocodile, where you get a bit of a side profile, his face is shadowed, and then you can see him holding a flower. And as he's talking about these plans and about what Baroque's works are going to be doing going forward, the flower wilts in his hand. Just putrid death. This idea that there is decay around this man. And that is so ominous. That is such a great hook for him. That is a great way to establish an aura and tone around him. Because Baroque Works is full of over-the-top, silly characters all over the place in this very arc, in previous arcs as well. It's all over the place, and they're established as shrouded in secrecy, but the actual members that we've seen so far are silly and off the wall and larger than life. But this guy, this aura established here through these scenes, this flower stuff, that's serious, that's dark. That's heinous. That feels like immense scale. So with him and Miss All Sunday, yeah, the gauntlet is set for sure. Sir Croc hangs up with Sanji, and then he says, "We need to dispose of Mr. 3 as he goes en route to Alabasta." And so that makes me wonder, is it because he knows that he's an imposter, that he was an imposter, or because he just feels he's incompetent? Either one would make sense, given the type of person he is. I don't know. But the eternal pose is delivered to Sanji. He picks it up, he gets rid of the unluckies, and then we flash, I love this, we flashed to Tashigi and Captain Smoker. Just a quick few pages of what they're doing. They're on an expedition to pursue Luffy and to ensure that he cannot have his way here, because of all the parallels he saw with Gold Roger, because of the Marine's supposed ideals and philosophy around piracy and stamping it out for the safety of all involved. For being justice and all that, all the stuff I talked about in Logtown. And so they're doing their own operations, and they intercepted the call to Sanji, between Sir Crocodile and Sanji. And so they heard enough to know where to go. And so they set a course for Alabasta. And, oh man, so many elements are going straight to Alabasta. We have obviously our protagonists in Princess Vivi's role in all of this, and we know the bits about what's gone on with her kingdom and Baroque Works' role in it, and we have Sir Croc, and we have Miss All Sunday. We have so many things heading towards there, and it just seems like a powder keg, so I cannot wait for when we get to Alabasta. It seems it'll be pretty explosive, I think. It's awesome. I love that we got just this little touch just to see what's going on over there, just to continue that sense of a broadened perspective and a big world in One Piece. I had missed Captain Smoker. Like I said earlier, I really like Captain Smoker, and I want to know more about him, I want to spend more time with him, and so this was great. But yeah, just to double back, I guess I got a little ahead of myself. The Giants are reunited. Luffy found him in his wax museum, Mr. 3, and I guess I didn't mention it, but he, by instinct, finds Mr. 3, and what I love about this is it's set up as this, ooh, there are all these wax figures in this wax museum. Which one is Mr. 3? Ooh, his voice is echoing around the place. And Luffy just goes, and he chooses to kick one of the figures, which ends up being Mr. 3. And he chose correctly. And he just goes, how did you know? How did you know where I was? And Luffy just goes, instinct. Would you expect anything else? That is Luffy in a nutshell, you know? But so everything's resolved. Everyone's okay. The people who were encased in the wax just lose some clothes, but they're all okay. And in the aftermath, what I really like is that it's very clear that Vivi, who at the beginning of this arc was very tense and nervous and anxious and unable to, like, kind of putting up a bit of a barrier between herself and the crew, here, through this arc, she's grown closer to them. She looks at their bickering and fights and whatever and nonsense, and she smiles. She's able to afford herself the smile that Nami smiled earlier in the arc, which is really lovely. This arc was good for establishing Vivi, and then they realize that Sanji has the Eternal Pose. They have the means to travel to Alabasta, and Usopp says goodbye to his masters. However, they want to give them a parting gift before they leave, because outside of this island, there is an island eater that preys on ships, and the giants want to defeat it for them so they can have a safe voyage as thanks. Oh, there's also a cute little detail where Sanji and Zoro are arguing about whose catch was bigger at the end of the day. That was cool. I liked it. It was funny. But the crew set sail, they set off, and they come head-to-head with the Island Eater. And the giants are thinking, we will not allow anyone to trample on our friend's pride. Again, honor, pride, the theme that's carried out from the beginning to the end. And this thing is a huge goldfish. Now, who in the past has told the story about a huge goldfish? Usopp. Usopp has told the story of this huge, gigantic goldfish to Kaya as a story of his own to embellish things and to immerse her in these worlds and provide her with some joy. He told these stories to Kaya. Now, a lot of people told me to pay attention to Usopp's tales. Now I am understanding why. So this is true. This tale about the giant goldfish was something that Usopp was talking about before, and he's shocked. Like, he is in shock to see that it's real. Now, I don't know the nature of that. Was Usopp subconsciously telling tales that had been told to him that he didn't even remember were true as tall tales, as lies? I'm not sure. I'm not sure why these are true and what the relationship is, but I'm very interested. And the fact that they are true, the fact that these embellishments, this beauty of storytelling, these tall tales, I love your lies, the fact that they are true, I think could say something about the idea of improbabilities in this world, with regards to dreams, with regards to achieving your goal, with regards to what this world holds, with regards to what lies are. But I'll put a pin in that and see if that ends up being important down the line. And I wonder, are all his lies going to be true that we've been exposed to, or just some? I don't know. We'll see. But Usopp is scared, yet nonetheless says, okay, it's time to be courageous, it's time to be brave. We sail on straight ahead and we trust in the giants. And he goes, right, Luffy? Right? And you can tell he's stuttering, he's scared. And he looks to Luffy, and Luffy goes, right, of course, we sail straight ahead. And what I love about that is it's a reassuring smile from Luffy there. He's supporting Usopp here, understanding what it means for him to take this step and be brave. And Luffy, who's someone who is brave, who embodies that bravery, is able to transmit that confidence to Usopp. And it's a lovely moment between the two. It's a lovely moment of guidance, so to speak. So they sail straight ahead, they get eaten by the Island Eater, but the giants cut straight through the Island Eater in a wonderful spread, and then they just move on past. They keep sailing. Usopp is in tears, marveling at the wonder of the warriors of Elbaf, and the giants just go, may good fortune accompany you. And then it's revealed the origin behind why they were fighting in the first place. They each caught 2 prizes, 2 hunts, so to speak, and a little girl said to them, which one of yours is bigger? And they argued over whose catch was bigger. That is the origin of all their fights. Just that. Something so simple, so base, it's so immaterial, the origin of this, it's so silly, so offhand, that the idea of them having forgotten about it is so appropriate, because it's not nearly as important as the reason they're continuing to fight. That pride, that honor, that treasure. That was always going to be more important, and the fact that the origin of this is so left field and so insignificant is a contributor to that idea. And what's cool is that the remains of their hunt from all that time ago, the remains, the bones of them, were there on the island this whole time. And the idea of comparing whose catch was bigger is a direct allusion to what happens in the little contest between Sanji and Zoro in this arc, so that's cool as well. And then this is the scene that I kind of alluded to earlier, where despite the way that she's connected with the crew more, Vivi is reflecting on what Igaram told her, that you have to get to Alabasta through any means, no matter what, etc., even if she must betray others, and so that's playing on her mind, which I imagine will be very important for future stuff. And in the meantime, Zoro's very self-critical. He's by himself and he's training by himself because he doesn't think that it's appropriate that he was caught and that he had to be saved by Luffy. You know, it's important because it all plays into his dream. If he wants to become the greatest swordsman, he can't be getting caught by people like this, and he's very self-critical as a result, and if he's going to help the crew and achieve his dream, he's got to do better than this, and so he's training on his own, which is a nice little, tiny little Zoro moment that I really appreciated. He's deceptively hard on himself, and the tone is very celebratory because now Vivi can finally go home, but in the last developments of this chapter, we see that Nami is burning up with fever. She's not doing well, she's collapsed, and their navigator seems to be out of commission. At the same time, we get a quick flash of someone who seems to be Mr. 2, who is carrying out the boss's orders of killing Mr. 3 en route to Alabasta, which is something to keep an eye on. But the most important thing to me is Nami is not doing well. If Vivi noticed this, she's in a panic, and she lets everyone know she's burning up with a fever. And that's where the arc ends, on a bit of a cliffhanger. So this was like I alluded to, a very solid arc. Very funny, probably the funniest arc so far, but filled with little tidbits and bits of character work that were not huge, but basically every character had a bit of something to grasp onto. Usopp a bit more than most. Nami's gotten some great stuff in Alabasta through the little details, the minimalistic details, that continues here. Maybe Vivi a bit more than most, because it's more of an introduction for her, but nonetheless, everyone gets something, and I appreciated that. And then the self-contained story of the Giants, and how it coalesces with Syrup Village and Usopp's ideas and ideals and goals in the future and coming of age, and Usopp's lies having basis here, the idea of the eternal fight, not remembering why you're fighting in the first place, and a bit of a subversion on that, it being shown as a fight for a fight's sake. If it's done in the sake of pride, maybe it isn't all that bad. And all of it all came together really effectively, really cohesively. I enjoyed it a lot. And I wouldn't say it's one of the stronger arcs. It's still around the middle, maybe in the weaker half of the arcs that I've read so far, but nonetheless, I thought it was very solid. I enjoyed it. I didn't find the antagonists as interesting as Arlong or Mihawk or even Captain Kudo or Krieg, but nonetheless, they did their job, and that was fine. And I liked the Giants. I liked the sense of scale Oda added to the world through the concept of these different climates for the different islands and the sheer amount of imagination and possibilities put into them. Yet lots of foundations set for the future. And Nami's not doing well. We'll see what goes on with her. But all good build-up. And despite this being, like I said, probably the weakest stretch, it is by no means bad. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. This was a solid 7 for me. And so my updated top 10 characters, I do want to say that Vivi is an honorable mention as well, and I imagine she'll make her way into the top 10 as the story continues and as long as she stays with the crew, but she is just on the outskirts. Same with Genzo. I've kind of decided that Genzo I like a little bit less than Arlong. The more I think about Arlong, the more rich and interesting of a character he is, so Arlong's my number 10. That's a slight change. Then number 9 is Nojiko, number 8 is Zeph, number 7 is Mihawk, number 6 is Shanks, number 5 is Sanji, this is all unchanged. Number 4 is Nami. Despite her getting a lot of great stuff here, she's elevated a lot. I like her more than before these arcs, like I've been saying throughout this video, but Usopp just went a little bit ahead of her, so Usopp is number 3. Then Zoro, who's, honestly, Usopp and Nami and Sanji, they're not too far off from Zoro, and Luffy. Luffy's number 1. So, just a slight change. Usopp and Nami switching positions, and Arlong is now definitively number 10. And then we also have Smoker in the background. We also have Dragon, who hasn't been reintroduced yet, but I'm so excited to see more from him. The potential for more Shanks or Mihawk stuff down the line, we'll see. And then the stuff with Miss All Sunday and the stuff with Sir Crocodile. Both characters seem to have immense potential, and I can't wait to see them. But yeah, I think if I had to rank those 3 arcs, my favorite would be Reverse Mountain, then slightly behind it would be Little Garden, and then it would be Whisky Peak. Alabasta as a saga so far would probably be like a light to solid 7, but I'm expecting it, like, I think this was a lot of establishment and introductory stuff for the arc. I'm expecting things to kind of kick off from here. It was necessary, it was a necessary respite, And like I said, I'm a fan of that decision for the tone and the pacing, but things are slowly ramping up, and I think the next island, Drum Island, is going to kick things off, and I can't wait. I hope you'll join me for that. If you'd like access to my review of Drum Island, the next arc, you can do that by heading over onto Patreon right now, and early access is available for $5 patrons. You can follow along with the read-through on Twitch, where I stream every Sunday and I read One Piece chapters. Every other Friday, generally, I do as well, so you can join in on the experience for that if you're interested. It's always a great time. People are always lending bits of insight. We always have lots of fun talking about the story. And if you're interested in seeing my experience with it, living vicariously through the live reads, you can by all means do that. But if you're just interested in these, I appreciate that a ton as well. If you'd like your comment to be highlighted in a future video, be sure to use the hashtag AJPiece. And all that aside, that's all I got. We were able to fit it all in a video. This is exceedingly long, but I'm happy I did. Hopefully you enjoyed, thank you for sticking with me, and until next time, many thanks for watching.